Edward Sterling had constructed his existence around the principle of control. Each choice, each investment, each meticulously planned step had brought him to an unimaginable level of success. He was a master of the game, fully aware of the dynamics of influence and maneuvering through them with unmatched skill. Yet, in a heartbeat, everything fell apart the moment he laid eyes on her. In the lobby of an exclusive resort, he found himself gripping the hand of a little girl with striking blue eyes. There, unexpectedly, stood Clara, his ex-wife, a figure from his past he never anticipated encountering again. What about the child? She was at the perfect age. The similarity was undeniable. A chilling awareness took root in his heart. Was Clara concealing a secret from him all this time? Had he inadvertently strolled by his own daughter, completely unaware of her existence? Edward Sterling was not the type to dwell on the past. His whole existence revolved around progress, making choices with unwavering confidence, and possessing a clear vision of what lay ahead. Years were devoted to mastering the intricacies of control, forging an empire through unwavering determination and meticulous discipline. To those observing from the outside, he seemed to possess it all. A thriving multimillion-dollar enterprise, authority, sway, and the remarkable capacity to enter any space and garner immediate respect. As he settled into the opulent lobby of the coastal retreat, cradling a glass of whiskey and allowing the soft murmur of chatter to envelop him, an unexpected sensation began to surface, the strange burden of fatigue. He arrived with the facade of seeking a rare respite, yet deep down, he was aware that his mind was already occupied with the upcoming meetings, the deals poised for completion, and the phone calls that awaited his attention. He was not particularly skilled at the art of relaxation. He savored another sip, releasing a slow breath as his eyes drifted toward the entrance. It was at that moment he caught sight of her. Initially, he believed his imagination was deceiving him. The figure that emerged from the revolving door bore an uncanny resemblance to a specter from his history, a presence he had assured himself he would never encounter once more. She glided with a serene elegance, her dark brown hair flowing over her shoulders as she cradled the small child in her arms. The vision stirred a profound tension within him. Clara. For a brief instant, he simply gazed, struggling to comprehend the reality before him. She appeared nearly unchanged from 3 years prior, radiant and composed, yet there was a fresh hint of weariness etched into her expression. The most surprising aspect of finding her here, in this unexpected location, was the child she held in her arms. A tiny girl, perhaps just 3, clung to Clara's neck, her face nestled into her mother's shoulder. Edward sensed his fingers clench around the glass he held. His heartbeat, once steady and controlled, now surged with an inexplicable urgency. He had not laid eyes on Clara since their union came to a close. Their separation unfolded smoothly, devoid of any theatrical legal confrontations or unresolved disputes. She had departed, and he had allowed her to leave, convincing himself it was the wisest choice. He immersed himself in his tasks, firmly believing that whatever connection they had previously experienced was merely a fleeting diversion. He had progressed to a new chapter, or at least that was the narrative he had consistently crafted for himself. Yet, witnessing her in this moment, accompanied by a child who appeared to be just a heartbeat away from the instant she had exited his life, an unsettling chill took root in his gut. Could this be her daughter? And if that were the case, why did he feel an unsettling familiarity with the answer? Clara approached the reception desk, adjusting the child in her arms as she engaged with the hotel staff. Edward scarcely took note of anything else in the room. The voices surrounding him diminished. The music emanating gently from the speakers transformed into mere ambient sound. His attention was drawn solely to the unmistakable resemblance of the little girl's features, even from afar. A profound sense of urgency enveloped him, an instinct unlike any he had experienced previously. He felt compelled to have a conversation with her, seeking clarity. Yet, before he could take a step, before he could summon the strength to rise, Clara was already making her way to the elevator, cradling the child tightly as she vanished behind the sliding doors. Edward stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the void left behind in her absence. The meticulously crafted existence he had established for himself had never seemed more precarious. Edward hardly found rest that night. Despite his efforts to banish the vision of Clara and the little girl from his thoughts, it persistently emerged, insisting on his focus. He devoted years to mastering the skill of compartmentalization, safeguarding his emotions in pursuit of logic and control. Yet this evening, his thoughts were a tumultuous clash of inquiries, each one devoid of resolution. Did the child belong to her? It was clear as day. The girl's grip on her was unwavering, and Clara's embrace was undeniably protective, leaving no room for uncertainty. Yet the true inquiry, the one that lingered in his mind, was the one he doubted he was prepared to confront. Did she belong to him? A peculiar sense of panic washed over him, an unfamiliar sensation he had never quite experienced before. Why had Clara never mentioned that she had a child, his child? Did she genuinely think he was unworthy of knowing? Or perhaps, had she believed he wouldn't mind? As the initial rays of sunlight began to seep through the expansive windows of his suite, Edward had reached a conclusion. He refused to waste another moment caught up in uncertainty. He sought the truth, and he was determined to uncover it. Following a brisk shower and a switch into one of his finely tailored suits, as he believed that maintaining control was essential in any circumstance, he made his way downstairs. He felt a stirring in his gut, a sense that Clara remained in the hotel, though he couldn't be certain. She would never have arrived at a location like this for merely one night. He entered the restaurant, his gaze sweeping across the room as he moved forward. The resort was designed for the affluent, those who effortlessly indulged in midweek getaways without a moment's hesitation. However, Edward had no intention of seeking them out. His gaze fell upon a quaint table by the terrace, where Clara was seated with the young girl at her side. His heart raced at the sight of them together in the daylight. Clara appeared just as breathtaking as ever, her dark brown hair gathered in a relaxed ponytail, exuding a natural grace in her demeanor. The child, Lily, if he recalled correctly from the name the receptionist had mentioned the previous night, sat quietly, swinging her little legs beneath the table as she nibbled on a piece of toast. It was the first moment Edward had genuinely observed her, and the sight caused a knot to form in his stomach. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue. Those striking blue eyes. It was undeniable at this point. Drawing in a calming breath, he advanced, approaching their table with determination. Clara observed him even before he uttered a word. Her body stiffened at once, her fingers gripping her coffee cup tightly. She cast a fleeting look at Lily before turning her gaze back to him, her face a mask of ambiguity. "We must have a conversation," Edward stated, maintaining a calm and measured tone. Clara paused, casting another look at Lily before giving a slight nod. "Not here," she whispered. "Let's rendezvous outside in 15 minutes. Edward gave a slight nod, then turned on his heel and walked away, keen to avoid any unnecessary drama. His pulse throbbed, emotions wound tightly just beneath the surface. 15 minutes later, he found himself by the serene garden terrace at the resort's edge, hands tucked into his pockets, gazing out at the vast ocean. The tumultuous waves offered no solace to the tempest brewing within him. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind him. He glanced over to see Clara positioned there, arms folded, her demeanor cautious. Edward inhaled deeply, attempting to find his composure. "Does she belong to me?" Clara recoiled just a bit, her gaze igniting with an enigmatic spark. She let out a breath, glancing down briefly before locking eyes with him. "Indeed," she replied gently. "She belongs to you." The ground appeared to shift beneath his feet. 3 years have passed. For 3 years he remained unaware. From this moment forward, everything in his life would change irrevocably. Edward remained motionless, his thoughts grappling with the significance of Clara's words. Her words were delivered with such simplicity and quietness, yet the effect crashed over him like a powerful tidal wave. Lily was his beloved daughter. His hands clenched in his pockets as he struggled to maintain a steady breath. A myriad of emotions clashed within him. Shock, anger, disbelief. But beneath it all lay something more profound, something primal. A child was born to him, and he had never even been aware. Clara fidgeted, her unease evident as she braced herself for his response. Her arms remained crossed, a silent shield against whatever might unfold next. "Why didn't you share that with me?" His voice was soft, yet the sharpness in it was unmistakable. Clara let out a quick breath, her fingers brushing against her forehead as she finally locked eyes with him. "Things were not meant to unfold in this manner, Edward. I never intended to keep her from you, but by the time I discovered I was expecting, we were already drifting apart. You seemed entirely absorbed in your tasks, creating a sense of distance. I was unsure of the best way to get in touch with you." His jaw clenched. "It seems you've made a choice on my behalf. You assumed I wouldn't be affected." Her eyes sparkled with a hint of irritation. "I assumed you might feel a sense of duty, that you would avoid responsibility not out of desire. I wanted to ensure that Lily never felt like she was a burden as she grew up." Edward released a sardonic chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. "Did you really believe that hiding her away was the wisest choice?" Clara stated with conviction. "I believed I was safeguarding her, safeguarding our interests. The difficulty of that choice was immense, yet in that moment, it seemed like the sole option available to me." Edward dragged his hand across his face, seeking to steady himself. He had constructed his whole existence on reason, on mastery, on executing well-thought-out choices. Yet, this was an unforeseen circumstance he had never anticipated. "She's 3, he finally murmured, his voice softer now. 3 years of her life vanished. Time lost that can never be reclaimed." Clara's face softened, and for the first time, a hint of regret flickered in her expression. She acknowledged it. "I won't attempt to explain it. However, Edward, I never intended to separate her from you indefinitely." He cast a keen glance in her direction. "So, what stopped you from getting in touch?" Clara paused, letting out a slow breath. "I feared that if I acted, you might claim her for yourself." The words left him speechless. He gazed at her, attempting to grasp the meaning of her recent words. "I wouldn't have done that," he said, his voice strained. Clara maintained his gaze, her expression brimming with an enigmatic quality. "Would you not?" Edward took a deep breath. Truthfully, he found himself uncertain about what actions he might have taken in that moment. He had been unforgiving in his journey, unyielding in his quest for achievement. Would he have battled for custody? Would he have attempted to manage the situation as he managed every other aspect of his life? Perhaps Clara was onto something. Perhaps he wasn't the kind of person she could rely on for something as delicate as a child. Yet he had transformed into someone entirely different. "I want to see her," he said finally, his voice unwavering. "I wish to deepen my connection with my daughter." Clara studied his expression intently, contemplating the trustworthiness of his words. Then, gradually, she inclined her head in agreement. "Very well," she replied gently. "However, we proceed according to Lily's preferences. She is unfamiliar with you, Edward. One cannot simply enter her world and anticipate that all will align perfectly in an instant." He nodded, comprehension dawning upon him. He expressed that he doesn't anticipate that. "However, I have no intention of leaving this time." Clara observed him intently, and for the first time, he noticed a change in her expression. The protective barriers still stood, yet a fissure had appeared, a tiny gap in their fortitude. "Then we begin at a leisurely pace," she remarked. "Progress unfolds gradually." Edward nodded once more, his heart constricted by feelings he struggled to understand. For years, he held on to the notion that he was alone, convinced that the only mark he would leave on the world was the empire he had constructed. At this moment, he finally understood that he had made a mistake. He was determined to do everything necessary to reclaim the time he had missed. Edward had always been composed. He had orchestrated billion-dollar agreements, faced off in boardrooms with the most formidable executives, and maneuvered through crises that would have shattered those with less resolve. As he lingered by the hotel's garden terrace, anticipation coursed through him while he awaited Clara's arrival with Lily, an unfamiliar sensation coiling tightly in his chest. How did you go about introducing yourself to a daughter who was unaware of your existence? Clara had emphasized that this would unfold gradually, according to Lily's wishes. Edward grasped that concept. He didn't anticipate her to rush into his embrace or refer to him as Dad all of a sudden. Yet the gravity of the situation continued to bear heavily upon him. He had already forfeited 3 years. He was determined not to squander another moment. The gentle patter of footsteps prompted him to glance back. Clara approached him, her stance both taut and poised, her deep-set eyes a mystery. And next to her, gripping her hand firmly, was Lily. Edward felt a sudden tightness in his throat. She was diminutive, hardly coming up to Clara's waist. Her dark curls danced gently with each step, and those blue eyes, mirroring his own reflection each morning, sparkled with a serene inquisitiveness. She grasped her mother's fingers tightly, uncertain of the unfamiliar circumstances that surrounded her. Clara knelt beside Lily and whispered gently, "Darling, it's Edward. He is a friend of mine." Edward experienced a sharp pang at the mention of the word, friend, yet he remained composed. He grasped the reason behind Clara's words. Referring to him as her father directly could have felt too intense. Lily gazed up at him, her head tilting ever so slightly, as though she were examining a riddle that eluded her understanding. She remained silent for a moment, simply gazing up at him with her remarkably large eyes. Edward lowered himself to her height, ensuring his actions were deliberate and gentle. "Greetings, Lily," he spoke softly. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance." Lily moved a bit, glancing at Clara as if seeking comfort. At her mother's nod, she finally found her voice. "Hello." It was merely a single word, delicate and hesitant, yet it caused a stir within Edward, a tightening of something deep inside. He offered a warm smile, aiming to soothe her nerves. "I understand you have an interest in puzzles. Is that really the case?" Lily's eyes sparkled with a glimmer of curiosity. She gave a slow nod. "I'm not particularly skilled at them," Edward confessed, maintaining a cheerful tone. "Perhaps you could share your knowledge with me at some point." Lily stole another look at Clara, as if seeking reassurance that this was acceptable. After a brief pause, she nodded again. Edward exhaled slowly, unaware that he had been holding his breath. It may have been small, yet it marked the beginning. Clara stood tall, her fingers gently gliding through Lily's curls. "How about we take a seat?" she proposed, guiding them to a shaded spot featuring a quaint table and chairs. Edward trailed behind, his thoughts still swirling in the aftermath of it all. He was blessed with a daughter. She sat directly across from him, toying with the hem of her dress and stealing furtive glances in his direction. Clara delved into her bag and retrieved a petite coloring book along with a vibrant set of crayons, setting them down before Lily. "Feel free to add some color as we chat, all right?" Lily nodded, flipping open the book and thoughtfully choosing a blue crayon. Edward observed her intently for a brief moment before he chose to speak once more. "What color do you like the most?" Lily kept her gaze down, responding softly, "Purple." He offered a warm smile. "That's an excellent selection. The hue is quite bold." Lily stole another look at him, maintaining his gaze for just a heartbeat longer before redirecting her attention to her book. Edward let out a breath, adjusting his position in the chair. He had anticipated discomfort, but now that he found himself in her presence, he understood the extent of the effort that lay before him. Clara seemed to have an intuition about his thoughts, as she gently broke the silence with her words. She tends to be reserved when meeting unfamiliar faces. Edward gave a slight nod. "That's perfectly fine. We'll proceed according to her rhythm." Lily immersed herself in her coloring, while Edward seized the opportunity to observe her closely. The delicate features, the way she bit her lip in concentration, the soft curl of her fingers as she gripped the crayon. It was almost dreamlike to realize that this little girl belonged to him. He had overlooked her initial steps, her first words, the small milestones that parents hold dear. However, he was determined not to let anything else slip by. After some time, Lily paused with her crayon and lifted her gaze to meet his. What's your favorite color? Edward beamed at the modest yet meaningful instance. He remarked that he believes he understands now. Purple seems quite appealing. Lily observed him for a moment, then nodded as though she found his response satisfactory. Clara observed the exchange, a gentle warmth spreading across her features. Edward understood that this was merely the start, yet for the first time in ages, he sensed he was precisely where he needed to be. Edward experienced a peculiar sensation, as if time was both dragging and racing simultaneously. The days after his initial encounter with Lily unfolded like a finely tuned performance, every exchange meticulously crafted, each instant imbued with a significance he had never foreseen. He had crafted his professional journey through assertiveness, through seizing opportunities, through ensuring that events unfolded precisely as he envisioned. However, this was not merely a transaction. This was his beloved daughter. No plan could compensate for the time that had slipped away. He and Clara had established a cautious rhythm in their daily lives. Each morning, he gathered with them for breakfast at the hotel's restaurant, positioned across from Lily as she nibbled her toast with meticulous little bites. She remained timid in his presence, uncertain of his role in her life, yet she had started to allow him closer. Initially, it was the little gestures, stealing a glance at him as he spoke, offering a nod in reply to his inquiries. She began to share small snippets of her day with him, mentioning the amusing bird she spotted outside their hotel window and her dislike for the orange juice, which she found too sour. He clung to each word with unwavering attention. One afternoon, as he and Clara lounged on a shaded terrace, with Lily engrossed in her small set of toys at their feet, he finally mustered the courage to pose the question that had been eating away at him since the moment he uncovered the truth. "What brings you here, Clara?" She averted her gaze from him initially. Her eyes remained fixed on Lily, observing their daughter as she meticulously arranged small plastic cups into a tower. After a moment, she expressed that we required a pause. Life at home has been challenging. Edward observed her closely, recognizing the tightness in her shoulders. He had been familiar with Clara to the extent that he could sense when she was concealing something. How hard he pressed. Clara let out a soft sigh, finally directing her gaze toward him. Lily has been inquiring, concerning her father. Something within him contorted at that. "What did you say to her?" Clara paused, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Initially, I explained to her that families can take on various forms. Some children have both their mommies and daddies together, while others do not. However, she possesses great intelligence, Edward." She kept on inquiring. "She was curious to find out if you were present, if you were even aware of her." Edward let out a breath, his gaze fixed on Lily, who remained absorbed in her tower. The realization that she had devoted her brief existence to pondering his presence, seeking answers that remained elusive, struck him with an unexpected heaviness in his heart. "So you brought her here," he murmured softly. Clara gave a subtle nod. "I wasn't sure if we would come across you, but there was a part of me that wished we would." Edward glanced at her again, his expression a mystery that defied interpretation. "Would you have ever shared that with me?" Clara swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the armrest of her chair with increasing intensity. "I'm not sure," she confessed. "I had the desire to. I came close countless times. Yet, fear gripped me." Edward hesitated, uncertain if he truly wanted to listen to her justifications. Yet, he was aware that it was necessary for him to do so. "What is there to be afraid of?" Her gaze fell upon her hands. "That you would despise me. That you would despise her, or that you would attempt to steal her away." Edward experienced a sudden wave of remorse. He had devoted a significant portion of his life to the notion that control was synonymous with security, that power implied an absence of vulnerability. Had he truly transformed into the sort of man that Clara had dreaded would wield his power against her? "I would never have done that," he said, his voice unwavering. Clara gazed up at him, her deep eyes probing his. "I longed to embrace that notion." For an extended silence, neither of them uttered a word. Years of silence stretched between them, a chasm filled with unspoken words. Then, Lily's tower fell apart with a soft clatter, and she released a faint, disappointed sigh. Edward bent down, meticulously gathering the plastic cups and arranging them once more. "Would you like to give it another shot?" he inquired. Lily cast a brief glance his way, then offered a subtle nod. She extended her hand, her tiny fingers lightly grazing his as she accepted the cup from him. It was an ordinary moment, yet for Edward, it held profound significance. Clara observed them, a gentle warmth beginning to touch her features. Perhaps her fears from that time were justified. Perhaps he was not quite prepared. Yet he was prepared at this moment. He was determined not to squander another moment. Edward had always struggled with patience. His whole existence revolved around swift decisions, bold actions that allowed no space for doubt. He was a person who established objectives and realized them, who always ensured that time was not wasted in obscurity. Yet, he was coming to understand that only through patience could he attain what was genuinely significant. Lily found herself gradually placing her trust in him, though each step was measured and deliberate. She continued to seek Clara's reassurance whenever he spoke, still pausing before responding to his inquiries. Yet, she was gradually allowing him to enter her world. She allowed him to take a seat next to her during breakfast, maintaining a distance from her mother. She allowed him to assist her in selecting colors as she created in her sketchbook. She allowed him to hold the door open for her, exuding a quiet confidence as she stepped through without hesitation. Though they were minor, Edward cherished them as triumphs. One afternoon, he stood outside the hotel's garden courtyard, observing Lily as she crouched beside a row of flowers. She glided her fingers across the petals, whispering softly to herself in a way that eluded his ears. Clara sat on a bench a short distance away, allowing Lily her space while observing her with the gentle vigilance of a parent attuned to every nuance of her child's actions. Edward approached with deliberate slowness, mindful of not alarming Lily. "What are you up to?" he inquired, maintaining a cheerful tone. Lily cast a fleeting look his way before returning her gaze to the blooms. She spoke to the bees with a straightforward demeanor. Edward arched an eyebrow. "Ah, what are they discussing?" Lily pressed her lips together, deep in contemplation. "They have a lot on their plates, which keeps their conversations to a minimum. However, I believe they have an appreciation for the flowers." Edward knelt beside her, watching the delicate bees darting among the flowers. He had never paused to observe details like this before. His existence had perpetually been overwhelming, relentless in its pace. Yet, in this moment with his daughter, the idea of slowing down felt surprisingly appealing. "Are you fond of flowers?" he inquired. Lily gave a slight nod. "Mother claims they bring joy to others." Edward cast a sidelong look at Clara, who observed them while feigning disinterest. He glanced over his shoulder at Lily. "She is correct. Indeed they do." Lily pondered this for a moment, then gestured toward a delicate, pale purple flower. "That's the one I like the most." Edward beamed. "I recall you mentioning your fondness for purple." Lily gazed at him, her expression one of astonishment, as though she had not anticipated him recalling such a minor detail. She remained silent, yet a subtle change flickered across her face, a gentler nuance emerging. Edward allowed the moment to linger between them, neither pressing nor hurrying. Eventually, Lily rose to her feet, brushing off her dress with a delicate touch. "I'm feeling quite hungry," she declared. Clara seized the moment to rise to her feet. She nodded in agreement, suggesting we head indoors. "Lunch is just around the corner." Edward paused for just a moment before he began to speak. "How about we share a meal together?" Clara glanced at Lily, her eyes seeking a response. Lily inclined her head, contemplating, then gave a nod of agreement. "Understood." It was a lukewarm affirmation, neither a resounding yes nor a definitive no. Edward viewed it as a step forward. As they stepped inside, a sense of calm washed over Edward for the first time since uncovering the truth. Perhaps he had transcended the role of a mere stranger. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to evolve into something greater. Edward was starting to understand that trust was not a commodity he could simply command. It was a journey he needed to undertake, bit by bit, experience by experience. With Lily, each little triumph held significance. In the days that followed, their exchanges flowed with greater ease. She continued to experience her moments of silence, pausing occasionally before addressing him, yet the doubt in her gaze was diminishing. She released her grip on Clara when he was close by. She closed the gap between them, no longer hesitant about his presence. One morning, he came down for breakfast to discover Lily already at their familiar table, a plate of pancakes awaiting her attention. Clara poured a cup of coffee, her demeanor reflecting a newfound sense of ease that had eluded her for days. Edward drew out his chair and settled in, observing as Lily meticulously drizzled syrup over her pancakes. "Are they worthwhile?" he inquired. Lily looked up at him, her mind working as she chewed. Then she nodded in agreement. "They seem fine." Edward wore a sly grin. "Merely satisfactory." After a brief pause, she remarked that strawberries would enhance them significantly. Edward acknowledged with a solemn nod. "I'll keep that in mind for the future." Lily observed him intently, as if weighing the sincerity of his words. In silence, she nudged her plate a bit closer to him. "If you desire, you may take some." Edward sensed a constriction in his chest. It was a seemingly modest act, yet from her, it carried a significance that she likely didn't fully comprehend. He grasped his fork, slicing off a delicate morsel before savoring the taste. "It's not too shabby," he remarked. "However, I believe you have a valid point. Strawberries could enhance their quality." Lily offered a subtle, contented smile before resuming her breakfast. Clara, observing the interaction in silence, cast Edward a glance filled with understanding. It marked a significant moment for Lily, as she had chosen to share something with him, and the awareness of this mutual understanding lingered between them. Following their morning meal, they chose to stroll along the shoreline. The secluded shoreline of the resort was serene, with the waves softly caressing the sand. Lily meandered between them, her tiny hand sometimes stretching out to grasp Clara's as they ambled along. Edward observed her as she crouched to retrieve a seashell, examining it closely in her hands before raising it for a better view. "Text, this one is quite lovely," she remarked. Edward grasped it from her, scrutinizing it closely. "Indeed it is. Are you fond of gathering shells?" Lily gave a slight nod. "Mama says they're akin to tiny echoes from the sea." Edward returned the shell to her with a gentle gesture. "In that case, it would be wise to hold on to it." Lily paused briefly, then deftly tucked it into the pocket of her dress. In a surprising twist, she extended her hand and grasped his, leaving him utterly astonished. It was a delicate, ephemeral connection, her tiny fingers encircling his for a brief instant before she released him and darted ahead, her laughter ringing out as the water danced around her feet. Edward remained motionless, a profound change stirring within him. Clara, sitting next to him, offered a gentle smile. She whispered that she's becoming accustomed to you. Edward exhaled gently, his gaze fixed on Lily as she twirled gracefully along the shoreline. He confessed that he believed he was becoming accustomed to her as well. For the first time in his life, the allure of business, power, and success faded, revealing that they weren't the most significant pursuits after all. Indeed, she did. Edward had devoted his whole existence to the notion that success was quantified by figures. Profits, mergers, competitive positioning. These were the foundations upon which he had constructed his reality. As he stood on the beach, observing Lily gather seashells with a radiant expression of joy, he came to the realization that perhaps he had misjudged everything from the start. The remainder of the afternoon unfolded in a manner that seemed almost dreamlike. As they strolled by the water's edge, Lily would dash ahead intermittently, eager to pursue the waves, only to return moments later, excitedly presenting him with yet another hidden gem she had unearthed from the sand. With every glance, her eyes reflected a growing trust, as if she was gradually starting to accept that he would remain by her side. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they had gathered a modest assortment of shells, which Lily meticulously organized on the wooden deck beside the beach chairs. She settled into a cross-legged position, carefully examining each item before categorizing them into distinct groups. Edward observed, captivated by her unwavering concentration on something so seemingly trivial. Clara settled next to him, a gentle breeze tousling her dark hair as she shifted her gaze between them. She had never experienced this before, she murmured gently. Edward glanced at her, a look of concern etching across his forehead. What did you have? Clara paused, weighing her words with deliberation. A paternal presence. Person who is fully engaged. Someone who gazes at her with the same intensity you do. Edward gulped, uncertain of how to reply to such a statement. For years, he had persuaded himself that family was an unnecessary burden, that love and connections were mere distractions that would hinder his progress. Yet, gazing at Lily in this moment, he experienced a deep longing for all the times that had slipped away from him. He finally admitted, "The past is beyond my control. However, I can exist in this moment. If you would permit me." Clara gazed at him, her expression a mystery that defied interpretation. "What occurs when we depart from this location?" Edward let out a breath, his fingers combing through his hair. He had also been pondering that. Their stay at the resort seemed like a secluded haven, a fleeting reprieve from the everyday world. Yet, he was reluctant to see this come to a close as they prepared to leave their hotel rooms. He expressed a desire for permanence, stating, "I don't want this to be temporary. I desire to be a part of her life. I desire to be her father, not merely for a fleeting moment or as a vague presence in her life. Truly support her." Clara observed him intently for a prolonged moment before she finally spoke. "It signifies being present, Edward. Not merely when it suits you, not solely when it aligns with your plans. She isn't a transaction to be bargained over. She is a young child in search of consistency, yearning for the assurance that those around her will remain steadfast." Edward gave a slight nod, his jaw clenching in response. "I am aware of that. I am determined to show you that I am capable of achieving this. I have the ability to fulfill her needs." Clara examined his expression, and in that moment, he witnessed the final remnants of her uncertainty disappear. "Then show me," she whispered. Just as he was about to reply, Lily dashed over, clutching something firmly in her hands. "Look," she said, her delicate fingers unfurling to showcase a tiny, flawlessly formed white shell. "This piece is truly unique." Edward leaned in, carefully accepting the shell from her grasp. "Stunning," he remarked. "What makes it unique?" Lily inclined her head, pondering. "Since it's the final one I discovered today. It resembles a fortunate shell." Edward smiled, a warmth spreading through him as he absorbed the purity in her words. "In that case, I believe we ought to hold on to it," he remarked. "Just a gentle reminder." Lily nodded with enthusiasm. Then, without a moment's pause, she settled onto his lap, her head gently resting against his chest. Edward sensed a sudden tightness in his chest. It marked the first occasion she approached him independently, unprompted and without the comfort of Clara's support. The gesture was quiet, yet it held profound significance. Clara observed them intently, and when Edward's gaze met hers, he noticed a change in her demeanor, a subtle hint of what appeared to be acceptance. For the very first time, Edward Sterling sensed that he had discovered something truly valuable to cling to. This time, he was determined not to let it slip away. The elegance of this conclusion resides in its subtlety, while still delivering a profoundly moving resolution. It's not about elaborate displays or theatrical proclamations, but rather something much deeper: dedication, faith, and the gradual restoration of connections. Edward Sterling starts this narrative as an individual who measures success through dominance and authority, convinced that emotional connections merely act as hindrances. Ultimately, he discovers that genuine achievement lies not in the structures he creates within the confines of the boardroom, but in the relationships he cultivates in his personal life. Lily's slow embrace of Edward is what imbues this journey with such strength. Her hesitation to fully accept him as her father adds a layer of authenticity to her trust. It unfolds in fleeting instances, where he finds himself beside her at breakfast, savoring her pancakes, extending his hand to hers with a sense of ease. The most poignant moment occurs when she willingly settles onto his lap, leaning against him as if she has finally found someone she can trust. That solitary action holds greater significance than any words might convey. Clara's role holds significant value. She transcends the role of a mere love interest. She embodies a mother, fiercely devoted to safeguarding her child's well-being. Her pause stems not from malice, but from a long history of doubt. She must understand that Edward is genuinely committed to remaining, that he won't abandon her when challenges arise. In that moment, when she urges him to demonstrate his commitment, she is offering him the chance to step into the role of the father Lily truly deserves, rather than deciding that fate for him. The sense of fulfillment in this ending arises from its deliberate pacing, avoiding a hasty move towards a flawless conclusion. Edward doesn't resolve all issues instantly, and the narrative doesn't wrap up with an improbable fairy tale ending. Instead, it concludes with the hope of something genuine. A father finally taking responsibility, a mother starting to regain her trust, and a little girl discovering that love can exist without strings attached. This tale unfolds around the theme of second chances, the quest to reclaim lost moments, and the profound understanding that family transcends mere genetics. It emphasizes the importance of presence, the act of being there, and the conscious choice to love, even in the face of challenges. Ultimately, Edward discovers not merely a daughter, but something infinitely more precious. He discovers a meaning that no level of riches or achievement could ever substitute.